Joining us now, Reverend Jennifer Butler, the founder in residence of Faith in Public Life. Also with us is Reverend Serene Jones, the president of Union Theological Seminary and a Johnston family professor for religion and democracy. And it's good to have you both. Reverend Butler, I want to kick off the conversation with a portion of your recent op-ed entitled, "Christian Nationalism is Dangerous to Christians." You write in part this: "We cannot allow our faith to continue to be hijacked by white supremacists covered in religious language. For the sake of our faith and our democracy, we must denounce Christian nationalism and reclaim a faith that values and affirms the human dignity of all people, including our own." So if you could maybe develop upon that point, how is the faith, the Christian faith, being sort of hijacked?
Well, that's right. Our entire faith is about the care of vulnerable people and pushing back on those who would oppress others. And unfortunately, what's happened in America is Christianity has long been used to justify the oppression of others. It was used to justify slavery. It was used to justify Jim Crow. Now it's being used to justify blocking women from the reproductive care, abortion care that they need to raise healthy. Oppression of others. It was used to justify slavery. It was used to justify Jim Crow. Now it's being used to justify blocking women from the reproductive care, abortion care that they need to raise healthy families. And that is not my faith. The majorities of religious people in this country support a woman's access to abortion care because we believe in her moral agency. We believe that she has the spiritual capacity to make these complex and important decisions for her own family. And so as Christians, particularly as a white Christian in this country, where Christianity has been used to justify terrible racial oppression, we need as Christians to speak more loudly about what our faith calls us to resist the pharaohs, the Egyptian kings, the Roman Caesars of our day. And so we are organizing now to push back on that and to really reclaim our faith for justice and for compassion.
Reverend Jones, in your recent op-ed for The Hill, you write in part, quote, "As ministers and heads of a seminary that is training the next generation of progressive faith leaders, we are outraged by this blasphemous use of the Bible as a tool of hatred and division and not as one of unity and love. And we know it is up to faith leaders from all major religious traditions, both in the U.S. and abroad, to fight against those twisting the word of God to justify bigotry, hatred, and discrimination. Right-wing religious leaders profess that the Bible supports these acts of hatred and division, but they ignore the lesson core to all of the major faiths: love a fellow human as you would yourself." And if I could ask you, is abortion being brought into this, and is the Bible being used incorrectly against it?
Absolutely. You know, there's two major points I like to make as a theologian who talks often about this issue. And the first is that abortion is not a biblical topic. There are one or two references to it that clearly prioritize the life and agency of the mother over a fetus, and that's it. To turn around and act as if the Bible has a mandate that is anti-choice, when the Bible on every page is affirming the agency of people and the care of the vulnerable, the poor, the orphan, the woman, at every turn. And the second is, it's very interesting to look back at history and realize that 50 years ago, the Southern Baptist Convention, which is now 100% anti-choice, came out with multiple platforms in which they affirmed a woman's privacy, said that the state did not have a role in the decisions that women make with respect to pregnancy. So the last 50 years has seen a very planned out, concerted, often savage and cruel program to bring this topic to the fore, in a sense, make it up and deploy it as a tactic.
So, Reverend Jones, I wanted to get your related idea, your thoughts on the concept of religious freedom, which is so often we perceive it as the freedom to have whatever religion or profess any religion you want, but it also can be freedom from religion, right? And freedom from religious extremism. Is that part of your concern here? Is that a value structure is being put upon from a small group onto the rest of the country?
Yes, absolutely. And that often gets overlooked because the same group of religious conservatives, evangelicals, are shouting about religious freedom in other countries. And yet in this context, it is about a small minority imposing their view on vast numbers of people who don't share their views and have own positions of conscience or, lacking a religious conviction, their own sense of moral rectitude that they want to be mandated by, not by someone else's view. So it runs directly against religious freedom.
And Reverend Butler, we'll get you to weigh in on the same topic and just the slippery slope that perhaps you perceive as to where's abortion now, but what other rights perhaps could be infringed upon or completely taken away by a Supreme Court that seems to be espousing a very narrow view of religious belief.
Well, that's right. So religious freedom is now being used as a tool and as a weapon to discriminate against others. And that is very tragic because it's an important right enshrined in our Constitution, but it's not about imposing your religious beliefs on someone else. It is about your ability to practice your own religious beliefs. And the majorities of people in this country support both access to abortion care, including religious people, and support LGBTQ equality. So this is the other right in which they have used religious freedom to try to pass, quote, religious freedom bills at the state level that actually are discriminatory bills. They are not bills at all and that are trying to shore up religious freedom. They would discriminate against LGBTQ people in housing and jobs and healthcare. And so we have been working at the state level here at Faith and Public Life, really to elevate faith voices that say, not in our name, don't be using religious freedom to discriminate against others.
Exactly.
Serene, on the topic of abortion, I've been talking about over the past several weeks how I grew up as a Southern Baptist, and that actually it seems strange to say now, but Baptists until 1979.
Yes.
Now, let's be clear. Let's be clear. Almost 2,000 years after Jesus' birth, finally found, quote, religion on abortion and became pro-life. As I said, mainstream evangelical churches were pro-choice, like, after the Beatles broke up. And I say, even after the Eagles broke up, this just happened. And not only did it just happen, in the grand sweep of the history of Christianity, it happened, and somehow, because of what Paul Weyrich and what Jerry Falwell and what conservative ministers were trying to do to separate voters from the Southern Baptist president, Jimmy Carter, suddenly abortion went from not being an issue at all to being the central issue. It is such a clear perversion. And again, if you just look at the history of Christian theology over 2,000 years, how did it become the centerpiece without these church leaders who were pro-choice when I was in high school, without them being called to account to answer for how they suddenly figured out 2,000 years after Jesus' birth that this was the most important part of Jesus' ministry, despite the fact he never brought the topic up?
Yeah, well, you said it so well. It was an issue that did not exist in the history of Christianity. And yet 50 years ago, suddenly it appears on the stage as the dividing issue. And that was the result of a very strategic process of a group of people coming together to decide what would be a wedge issue that we could begin to peel off Southern Baptists from the Democratic Party, peel off progressive religious people who, on some issue that can really get them in their moral gut, and abortion came to the fore as that issue. And it was literally orchestrated and made up in a room full of people planning and strategizing how to make this the thing that people would live and die for, along with LGBTQ rights, which would follow within the next 15 years. You know, there's an article I read just the other day in 1969 in evangelical publication arguing against the Catholics for their position on abortion, saying the exact same things we're saying today, namely that this is not in the Bible, it is not in his Christian history, and they're using it for their own political purposes. This was coming from the Southern Baptists themselves, which describes exactly what they're doing today.
Reverend Dr. Serene Jones and Reverend Jennifer Butler, thank you both very much for your contributions this morning. Thank you for being on.